Testing, 1, 2, 3. better check it. We'll just be a minute, everyone. We have to sign into our new and supposedly better system. Hopefully somebody else is here by this. Well, he should be here. In fact, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're now officially linked in, so for future posterity, anybody wants to look up anything that was said or anybody that spoke, we're all good to go. And we're very tight for quorum, so we're just going to check to make sure where the rest of our folks are. We do know that Councillor Hobbs is not here because we have the briefing right now on the Western LRT. So, without further ado, any declarations of interest?
Yes.
Turn your mic.
I'd like to declare interest on 2 items. And I'm told I read this out so you can listen really carefully. It's fascinating. I, Barry Podolsky, declare a direct pecuniary interest on items 4 and 5 on the Built Heritage Subcommittee agenda. Item 4, which is an application to move 2 properties, 273 and 275, 279 Sussex Drive, designated under Part 5 of the Interior Heritage Act and located in the Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District. And item 5, which is the application to reconstruct the former Ogilvy's department store at 124 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Interior Heritage Act. As I am the owner of Barry Podolsky Associates, Inc. Architects, and my firm has been retained to provide professional services in relation to Barry Podolsky Associates, Architects, Inc. on the above 2 items. I'll be leaving the room when those come on the agenda. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Confirmation of minutes of May 9th. Anyone have anything to change? We're good? Carried? Okay, so we're going to go through the consent agenda. We do have a number of speakers today, and we're going to see if there's some that we don't have speakers and that we can just carry on consent. The first item up is the application to alter 6576 4th Line Road, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in Councillor Moffat's Rideau Goulburn ward. Do we have any speakers for that? Anyone in the audience want to speak? Councillor Moffat? You're good? That carried? Number 2, we do have some speakers, so we will hold that one. That is the application to alter 132 Stanley Avenue. Number 3, do we have any speakers for Coultron? We don't have any speakers that have formally designated they wanted to speak. Is anyone in the audience want to speak to the addition at 218 Coultron Road in Rita Rockcliffe Ward? No? We did get some comments on this application, so thank you for those of you that are here that did comment. So is that carried? And so we will be holding number 4, which is the application to move 2 properties at 273 and 275 to 279 Sussex, which Vice Chair Podolsky has already declared a conflict on. And we have a actually, I need you to step back from the table for a minute. Just go over in the corner. I know it's crazy. We do have a speaker, if necessary, for the application to reconstruct the beautiful former Ogilvy's. Well, we can't carry with 3 of us. Oh, God.
We can hold this up until...
We're going to have to hold it until Councillor Clark gets here, so I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but just on a point for the record is that if a declared conflict reduces your number of members, despite any other provision, then the remaining number of members is deemed to constitute a quorum, provided the number is not less than 2. So I believe that you are fine to proceed under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act.
Because I did ask that question about half an hour ago, and that's not the answer I got.
And I understand that, Madam Chair, but we have confirmed it, and it's fine.
Good news. Okay, so that's one of the issues, I guess, or having the benefit of having such talent on this subcommittee means that often they're going to be involved in some of the work going on behind the scenes. So in that case, now that we are allowed to, is Mr. Brisbane, you don't need to speak if we are ready to carry this? Okay, because it was Richard Brisbane that had signed up to speak if necessary. So for the rest of us, is it carried? Thank you. Very good. It's going to be very good to see the facade come back to life. Thank you for coming today. And so we will go back to, Barry can come back from your corner.
I'm trying hard to put you in your corner, you stay there.
So we have the application to alter 132 Stanley Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And Ms. Collins, you're going to present this to us?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As you've just said, this is an application to alter 132 Stanley Avenue, property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This is the location of the property. It's at the corner of Stanley Avenue and Queen Victoria Street, actually just down the street from the application that we looked at the last meeting, just to orient you. This is 61 Queen Victoria right here, and this is the property that we're looking at, so it's quite close. This property was subject to an earlier application under the Ontario Heritage Act in 2008 for demolition of the building and construction of 6 townhouses on the site. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just to give the committee some background. That application was approved by council, but the variances and severance and consent for severance were refused by the Committee of Adjustment, and the project was eventually abandoned by the applicant. This is the house in question for today's application. It was constructed in 1967 and is a Category 4 building in the Heritage Conservation District, which means that it is deemed to not contribute to the character of the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District. It's a one-story bungalow clad in artificial stone with a low-sloped hip roof. Just to give you some of the current conditions along the street. This is looking west along Stanley. The subject property is at the right, just near the stop sign. Across the street from the stop sign, sorry. Right here. This is looking east along Stanley. You can't see the building, but it would be right here. And this is looking north along Queen Victoria, so I'm south of Stanley, looking north towards the corner. So there is this building here, which is built in 1967, and directly across the street there's a very similar building built in the same time period on the other corner of Stanley and Queen Victoria. This property, even though it has been determined to not be contributing to the heritage character of the district, it is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and applications to alter any designated building require City Council approval. The application before the committee today involves the removal of the roof of the existing one-story bungalow and the construction of a second-story addition. The carport portion of the building will remain unchanged. And the house is to be converted from a single-family house to a semi-detached through consent for severance at the Committee of Adjustment. So that's not part of this application, but it's relevant information for the committee. This is the site plan. So the footprint of the building will remain unchanged because the second floor addition is simply being put on top of the existing main portion of the building, and then the carport portion will remain the same. This is the proposed front facade with the second-story addition to be clad in stucco. It was determined that it would be very difficult to match the stone veneer that is on the lower story, and it would be advisable to have the building, to have the new addition be distinguishable from the old portion of the building. It's got a 8/12 pitch hipped roof. This shows you the rear view. So the lower portion here is the existing portion, which is not having an addition added to it, and then the front portion will have a second story. This is the side elevation. So this is the along Stanley. So this would be between this house and its neighbor on Stanley. And then this is the side elevation on Queen Victoria. Just provides you with a rendering so you can see the final proposal in 3D. And just this is from Queen Victoria. So the recommendation before the committee today is to approve the application to alter, to issue the heritage permit with a 2-year expiry date, and to delegate authority for minor design changes to the General Manager of Planning and Growth Management. The New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District plan has guidelines for additions to existing buildings. However, they are more aimed at managing Category 1 through 3 buildings, but in the absence of anything else, we've used the guidelines below. Additions should be located in the rear yard and should be distinguishable from the original building. So obviously the existing, the proposed addition does not meet guideline 1 in that it is not located in the rear yard, but because the building is a Category 4 building in the district, and because it is currently only 1 story, which is out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood, it was felt that it was not inappropriate to add a second story to this building on top of it rather than in the rear yard. Heritage Ottawa was notified of the application and supports the alterations, and their comments are included in the report. Neighbors within 30 meters of the property were notified of the application and offered the opportunity to comment. I believe we only received 1 comment, and I think the committee has that. And the New Edinburgh Community Alliance was notified of the application and submitted comments in opposition to the proposal, and I believe the committee has those comments as well. They were not included in the report because they did not come directly to me. So in conclusion, the department supports the application because it's appropriate in scale, materials, and detailing. It's distinguishable from the original building, and the height is compatible with other buildings along Stanley, and will have little impact on the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District. Happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
I just had one question, and that was with respect to the height of it. You say that it's compatible with the other dwellings, but there's no, is it the same height as the others, slightly lower or slightly higher? It does appear quite large with that large roof on it, and I just wondered if that was taken into account in that comment. Thanks.
I believe, through you, Madam Chair, that it is actually slightly lower than the neighboring building along Stanley. And then there is nothing right now to the rear because the property backs onto a vacant lot.
Anyone else? So we do have speakers, as I said earlier, and the first one up is Joan Mason. And then Marie. Welcome.
Good morning. I wanted to start by sharing with you the Heritage Matters magazine of the Ontario Heritage Trust, which I think you all have a copy of. There's a nice little piece on New Edinburgh, as well as a wonderful article on HCDs. So, to begin. When last I appeared before this committee regarding a controversial project involving spot zoning on the historic lanes of New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District, I expressed concern over the piecemeal approach to planning currently being taken by developers and city staff. A limited case-by-case approach to review and approval is frustrating for the community and is somewhat misleading for this committee. Today, the staff report does mention a previous proposal in 2008 to redevelop the site, building 6 townhouses with the heritage permit being approved by council. Now, in the written version, today you have spoken to it, but in the written version, it does not mention that the proposal was vigorously opposed by the community and was refused by Committee of Adjustment. Then, last year, an application was submitted to subdivide the original lot into 3 separate parcels of land. One parcel to contain the existing detached dwelling, 132 Stanley, and construction of a semi-detached dwelling on the other 2 parcels. Although detailed plans for the new semi fronting Queen Victoria were not available at the time of the request to sever, NECA and neighbors accepted the application in good faith and did not oppose it. Now we find the existing detached dwelling is to be converted into a semi-detached dwelling. Meanwhile, we still do not know anything about the appearance of the proposed semi-detached dwelling that is supposed to be built on the adjacent severed lots. So here we are again, being asked to approve one piece of a puzzle with incomplete information, not knowing the full extent of the overall project to redevelop the original lot, nor how this piece will fit in. Yet the proposal for 132 Stanley is here before you for approval. Staff are recommending it, the outcome seems inevitable, and our intervention is pro forma and inconsequential. For the record, our submission to this committee identifies our concerns about this proposal regarding overbuilding that results in an absence of green space, the failure to comply with the zoning bylaw, including the heritage overlay, the question mark raised by inclusion of 4 kitchens, which implies 4 dwellings, not 2, the roof design that seems inconsistent with the historic neighborhood, and the absence of a cultural heritage impact statement. Despite these concerns, we are realistic and jaded in our expectations regarding the inexorable transformation and loss of the Heritage Conservation District. So although our preference would be to retain the 1967 era bungalow as is, we have proposed a compromise that would allow the new construction, but with a flat roof, without any rooftop terrace stuff. We believe this might minimize the negative impact of the new construction. At the same time, we would suggest the committee might wish to seek reassurances from the developer on 2 items. Pardon me. A creditable rationale for including 4 kitchens in the proposed semi, and current plans for the 2 neighboring lots on Mr. Lauzon's property upon which a semi was supposed to have been built. Finally, and more generally, it is our experience increasingly that we are engaged in a fundamentally flawed review process for heritage conservation in Ottawa. If the Built Heritage Subcommittee shares this concern, perhaps something can still be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have a question? But don't go anywhere yet. Anyone have a question of Ms. Mason?
Sure.
Councillor Clark?
John, the previous iteration, the one that showed up, that didn't fly.
Yes?
What did it include?
It include 6 three-story townhouses, fronting on Queen Victoria, but with a lane running from River Lane to Stanley. 6 double garages, balconies hanging off the back, covering the ground totally.
So in your view, this is more modest?
Oh my goodness, yes. But again, in the context of what is the complete development to be, because right now, they could still do 6. If this is really a 4-unit building, and you do 2, you've got 6. But we just don't know.
And you had raised the 4 kitchens, and did you get an answer?
Yes, they are for entertaining purposes.
For entertaining purposes?
Yes.
Well,
that's what Mr.
Too many
Chown...
things that conjures up. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And whether any of us like it or not, that's not up for us to discuss today at the number of kitchens, where we have limited powers, and they're all about the heritage and about the conservation district and about what we can do with the application as it relates to us here. I do know, and I'm going to ask Vice Chair Podolsky to read a motion that he has, which I think speaks to some of what your suggestions were. They're not specific to, for example, the flat roof, but there is. Would you like to read that, please?
I would. I have to say that the new Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District is an exemplary district for not only Ottawa but for other cities, and I think that the mission that has been undertaken, by NECA and others to conserve it and enhance it is sterling. This is really important. The particular house, at this address, built ironically in centennial year, which reflected our national heritage and pride in the future, is, I think, to be charitable modest. It does not fit with the district, and I think that the addition, of the second story, I think is just fine as a concept. I think that the architects for the owner need some help, and so my amendment is to amendment number 2, where the delegate authority for minor changes to staff, and I'm going to suggest that the following words are added: including refinements to the exterior design of the second floor addition that more sensitively reflect the design guidelines in the new Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District, being the delegation authority to the General Manager of Planning and Growth Management Department. So that's my amendment. I have to say, Madam Chair, that the idea of a flat roof could be one of the solutions, but I would, if this motion is passed and the amendment is taken, then it would be the heritage staff that could work with the owner and the owner's architect to achieve something that is not just acceptable, but a paradigm of great design. So let's go for great.
Okay, thank you.
No, we have another speaker.
I want to carry his amendment.
No, not until we have the other speaker. Anybody else have any questions of Ms. Mason? Thank you very much for coming out today. Marie Chown. So Marie, you've seen the motion on the screen. That's one new addition, right? Did you notice it there? Because I noticed you weren't looking at it.
I was listening as it was being read.
Oh, okay.
What I want to know is, are you moving in where there's 4 kitchens?
We're not discussing the kitchens for
Councillor
the
Clark,
so
no,
far
I'm not.
second time today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For those who don't know me, my name is Murray Chown. I'm a senior planner and project manager with Novatech Engineering, and we filed the applications on behalf of the owner applicant. I don't want to waste too much of the committee's time repeating the submissions you've heard from planning staff, but I do think that there's a few points that need to be emphasized. It's clear that the existing structure is not considered to be a building that contributes to the heritage character of the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District. That's confirmed by the decision of Council in 2008 to allow for the demolition of this building. So the proposal is before you actually, I think, will result in a structure that actually is more consistent and more compatible with the neighborhood. There are few, if any, other examples of single-story structures in this neighborhood. The vast majority of the buildings are 1.5 or 2-story buildings, and I think it's important to note, particularly in consideration of Mr. Podolsky's motion, that the immediately adjacent building, and there only is one, and so the immediately adjacent building on Stanley, in fact, is a 2.5-story structure with a roof line that is well in excess of the roof line that's being proposed with the addition. We did have discussions with Ms. Mason a few weeks ago, and the comments that she's made this morning are consistent with the comments she provided to us when we met with her at the time. And one of the things that she raised then and has raised again today and has led to some discussion is the notion of a flat roof rather than a pitched roof for the second-story addition. I think that the design actually is sensitive to the guideline that encourages us, when we're looking at building additions, to not to necessarily try to mimic the older architecture in the neighborhood, where you do have flat roofs in this neighborhood, but the architecture or the style that's being proposed here is just as consistent with the neighborhood with the pitched roof, and certainly more consistent with the built form immediately adjacent to the property. We spent a great deal of time in discussions with staff about various design approaches in terms of materials and window treatments before making the submission to the city. I think that we're very comfortable and very pleased with the proposals before you, and I think that staff feel the same way. We'll certainly be happy to have further discussions with them about refinements, but I wouldn't suggest that that will result in any dramatic changes to what you've seen before you. So in conclusion, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I would encourage you to support the staff recommendation. I think it's worth noting that, and I'm certainly pleased to see that the comments from Heritage Ottawa are very supportive of the project as it's being presented to you today. If you want to talk about kitchens, I'll talk about kitchens. Thank you very much.
Are you going to ask about kitchens?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Looking at the photo up there, that means that the existing very nice house is going to be demolished?
No, the existing house is being maintained. All of the ground floor is the existing building. So one of the interesting things is about this proposal is we're maintaining the character of the original building with the angel stone veneer that's on the building and the very substantial front steps and front entrance to the existing house, and the double doors that are on the house today will be maintained. So the ground floor of the building is remaining intact, and then the second story is easily distinguished from the existing ground floor, which once again, as Ms. Collins indicated in her presentation, is consistent with the guidelines for the Heritage Conservation District. So no, the existing house is not being demolished. The roof is being taken off and a second floor is being built.
This transformation looks considerably different than what my picture of the current house is. They're changing the exterior cladding or something?
Not on the ground floor.
Is this just the artist drawing?
It's a light gray angel stone that's there today. Do you want to put the existing picture in? So that's the bay windows,
Yep.
the very substantial front entrance, and the light gray angel stone, or what's there today.
Yeah,
And
the other picture didn't show all the gray stone, that's all.
Part of the presentation was that they were saving that. Can you go to the concept now, please?
Oh, I see, it's sort of muted. Okay, I guess it's the same. It just didn't look the same.
It's that bungalow is very much a 60s kind of a look. I said to Councillor Moffat, not that he was born then, sure, but I was, and lived in 60s bungalows. The only thing missing was the planter underneath the bay window.
yes.
So I lived in a few of those.
Yeah, they removed that some years ago.
Did they have one?
Something you'd see in City View, I think, as much as anywhere else, or St. Clair Gardens.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Chown? Okay. Does anyone in the audience, else who hasn't already signed up, have anything to say? Thanks, Mr. Chown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, good. So we'll bring it back to committee then. And we have the motion that I asked Vice Chair Podolsky to put on the floor so that we were aware. And I just want to point out that it's including refinements. It's not, it doesn't say including major overhaul, including refinements to the exterior design of the second floor. And so does anyone have any comments to make? No? So we will, on the amendment?
Carried.
Carried. On the motion as amended? Carried. Thank you. And do we have our date firmed up yet, Joan? We do. I forget what date I suggested, but it was in June, right? Yeah. Next Tuesday. All right. That's not for everybody. Joan and I are getting together, just letting you know. Anyway, I'll see you then. So thanks very much for those who came up for 132 Stanley. Now we're going to our other held item, and we'll ask Mr. Podolsky to not just go in the corner, but to actually leave the building.
See you at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Did you sign out? I'll sign out. He'll sign you out. So this application is to move two properties. You will recall that City Council approved, did not approve demolishing them, as was the request. And so at that, when that decision was made, a process was put into place that specifically to these two buildings, how they could be repositioned in order to accommodate the changes to a modified Sussex, if you will. But what is important, obviously, to note is from a heritage perspective is that City Council did value these two properties and want them to be sustained. So we'll have a brief presentation and then speakers. If anyone else who hasn't signed up in the interim would like to speak to it, please do. Right now I have Nancy Miller-Chenier. Hi, Nancy. I see you there. I got to get new glasses so I can actually see farther. Otherwise, it's like guessing. It's good I'm getting to know some of you now. It makes it a bit easier. And Leslie Maitland. So welcome, Councillor Fleury. So go ahead, please, Sally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is an application in front of you seeking permissions related to the relocation of these two properties on designated properties on Sussex Drive. Whoops. Oh, that wasn't me. And what we're looking at is the recommendation is to support the concept of moving the two buildings and delegate authority for the actual details to planning and growth management. So as they are located at the north end of Sussex, just between Bolton and Cathcart, just as the Sussex curves. Here they are in an aerial view. So this is the it's these two buildings are the subject properties, and Sussex and this is Sussex. There are other NCC-owned buildings on the site, but they are not affected by this particular application. So this is the more northerly building, 273 Sussex Drive, and then the row house, which to its south. So the buildings are designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and all applications to alter, move, etc. require City Council approval, because every single building in a Heritage Conservation District is protected by the by the Ontario Heritage Act. So the application is to relocate, as we said, the two buildings to accommodate the proposed Sussex Drive reconstruction project that will realign the road, allowing cycling lanes to be constructed. Keep pushing the wrong button. So here is the proposed realignment. This is to illustrate the concept of the road. So it will include 4 traffic lanes of around 3 meters each, a bicycle lane of 1.5 meters, and a sidewalk about 3 meters. The sidewalk will vary a little bit as it goes around the corner. This is not only consistent with current standards for roads within the City of Ottawa, it also reflects the NCC's aspirations for the completion of Confederation Boulevard and the standards that have been established for Confederation Boulevard. This is the last piece of Confederation Boulevard that needs to be completed between Cathcart and Foreign Affairs, so it will bring the furniture and etc. for that Confederation Boulevard into that stretch of Sussex. So the issuance of the heritage permit, I'd say, is to relocate the buildings conditional upon the approval. Right now, at this particular point in time, the final details of how the move is to be accomplished and the site plan of where the buildings are going to go is not complete. It's under study by Vice Chair Podolsky and his firm. But the NCC would like to be able to report to its board meeting at the end of June what is happening with these buildings. So that is why we are here in front of you today without the final plans. Our commitment is we will, as staff, will review the plans for moving the buildings, and that will include how they will be moved safely and where they will end up and how the site will be landscaped, etc. The city has been involved with moving buildings through the March House and the horticulture building, so there is expertise for us to judge whether the conservation plan is sound and whether the ideas within it are possible. And then we also will bring that conservation plan for information back to the committee, so the committee is fully aware of what is being planned for the buildings. So that is what we are asking you today, and why it has this large delegated authority. When looking at this particular application, we did look at, as we always do, the policies that are related to heritage within the official plan, and the official plan says that relocation can be considered if it is the only way to conserve a designated heritage resource. In terms of the aspirations for the road work, it has been determined that moving these buildings eastwards on their lots is the only way to conserve the resource, so that is consistent with this policy of the official plan. There is a cultural heritage impact statement that was prepared by ERA Architects that had a number of options within it that was prepared for the last application, and one of the options was to recommended the relocation of the buildings on their lots, and it was option 1, but at the time it was determined not to go ahead with that particular option, and now we are back with the supporting or reflecting the option 1 that as recommended in the cultural heritage impact statement. Consultation. Heritage Ottawa was notified of the application, and its comments are included in the staff report, and neighbors within 30 meters of the property were notified, and you have received some comments. And plus the Lower Town Community Association was notified of the application, and you have received its comments yesterday, I think, and the councillor also has been involved, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor, but I think supports the concept of moving the buildings back on the lot. It's in the report. So the conclusion, the department supports the application because it allows the road reconstruction that will realign the road and provide a bicycle lane to proceed, and is consistent with the official plan regarding when moving a building is appropriate. Thank you. Questions? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I guess I want to congratulate staff because I know this has been a very challenging file, and with the original proposal to demolish some time ago, this seems like a move in the right direction. I guess my concern is I know this area well. I've been driving it and bicycling it for the last 30 years, so I'm very familiar with the layout. And the first press items I heard on it, and it's reinforced by the report today, was the comment in the press and in your presentation, the statement, to allow cycling lanes to be constructed. And as a bicyclist and one who bicycles down that road, I think that is a very important addition to that area. But having bicycled it and knowing it well, what was interesting to me is that the tightest spot along that road is in the block between Cathcart and Briere, not where these buildings that we're considering today are, but further south. And that is, in the plans, they show a bicycle lane being added there. So the question that it raised in my mind is if we can add it in the tighter area, why does the statement keep being made that we have to move these houses to allow cycling lanes to be constructed? It would seem to me that clearly they can be constructed without moving the houses, since there is more space there than there is one block south.
Just to interrupt, and I am interrupting because this really is not, that horse has left the stable.
Well,
whether it's on a cycling path or not, the fact is that your question about the cycling lane and the width of that, or where it's tighter and all that kind of thing, it really has to do with what was approved at the Transportation Committee and by Council, and that really, I don't know what, I guess my question would be, what are you hoping to accomplish by bringing this up?
With respect, my concern is in the official plan, section 4.6.1, subsection 4 says when relocation is the only option. It's been stated as being the only option to allow, as I understand, the construction of a bicycle lane. So I'm specifically referring to the heritage aspect of relocating the buildings. The statement has been made that this is the only option. Therefore, I'm wondering why it is the only option if the bicycle lanes, if it's for the bicycle lanes, and the bicycle lanes can be added. So I'm trying to, and I guess my concern, the wider picture, we're looking at this one particular area. I think this affects every neighborhood in Ottawa, whether it be New Edinburgh or Westboro or Vanier or the Glebe, where there's a transportation issue and it conflicts with a heritage issue. The question is, does heritage staff automatically say transportation has decided it's the only way and therefore heritage agrees, or does heritage have the ability to question what transportation has said and then say maybe transportation doesn't necessarily trump heritage? And that I think is a much bigger issue and a much bigger question, and I think it goes back to the ideas here about 60s planning, where transportation led the way and heritage was the back issue. And what I would like to know is, does heritage have the ability to say, to question the decisions that transportation has made? Thank you.
Good. Very eloquent. I'm going to go to Mr. Smith first, and then we'll go to our heritage staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we do have staff here from Public Works and also the consultant team that's been retained. And I guess first off, and I know, Madam Chair, that this is a Heritage Act application. I think to Mr. Smallwood's point, there is a tie-in with respect to the official plan. But I think the important thing to understand, it was very thoroughly vetted the last time the application or the application for demolition was before the previous iteration of this committee. There were many options that were investigated with respect to how to improve the condition accommodations along the curvature of Sussex Drive. And one of the driving motivators behind the work that's been undertaken is really to introduce the cycling lanes in a safe manner, given that we do have Sussex Drive accommodating larger vehicles, and it's really the overlap of vehicles as they turn the corner, particularly larger vehicles, the buses, the transport trucks, and so on, where they tend to divert into sort of the area where the cyclists would be passing. And so the bottom line is there were many options that were considered, that were looked at. They ranged from reducing the number of lanes to accommodate the cyclists. They included cantilevering the roadway out over top of the bluff on the Lady Grey side. And at the end of the day, I think one of the key elements that was associated with the assessments that were undertaken was the cultural heritage impact assessment. And as Ms. Coots identified, the first recommendation that was brought forward through that process, being involved in the review of what was being initiated, the conclusion, the recommendation was that we should be looking at relocating the buildings. The initial proposal was to demolish. That clearly was not accepted by council, so it's been looked at again in a very thorough way, and again the conclusion that's been arrived at, and which is reflected in the cultural heritage impact statement, is the relocation of the buildings is the only effective way that you can actually achieve the ultimate objectives with respect to the improvements that have been identified is required for this section of Sussex Drive for many, many years.
Thank you. Before we go to questions of Mr. Smith, did you have anything to add, Sally? You don't? That's fine. Don't make it up as you go along. If you think you've already covered it,
Madam Chair. No, thank you very much.
Okay.
That is fine.
Good. So I'll bring it back to committee. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Smallwood, do you have questions of Mr. Smith, of what he said? And anyone else? No?
I just had one question. I understand the issue with trucks diverting into the lane, and I think the issue is that what this bend in the road does is it forces everyone to slow down, which may not be necessarily a bad thing. But I wondered, with respect to diversion into lanes, the solution on Laurier Avenue has been a divided lane that stops vehicles from straying into bicycle lanes, and that certainly would seem to be a lot cheaper than relocating the houses. Was that looked at? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I think we're going to get into that level of detail. I would prefer that those that have been more involved in looking at the options come forward and respond to those questions. But my understanding very quickly would be if you're introducing a separation, it's not so much that would prevent that from happening. You'd now have a situation where they would ride over top of that separation. So it's really the functionality of the ability for vehicles to safely maneuver around that corner. You're 100% right. It is a curvature. There is a signage there right now that will be retained, identifying what the speed limit is for traveling around that curvature, but it really has everything to do with safely accommodating cyclists in a dedicated cycling lane, that the cyclists will be comfortable traveling down without the potential fear of what we have today. And if we didn't widen and accommodate for that the way that's being proposed, and even if you did have a separation, my view is, and I would ask those that are more involved with it, that there is still that potential that the backs of the vehicles would still bump over that separation.
Would you like more? Because I would be happy to ask the other folks in the audience to come forward for more. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions of staff? No? So I'm going to ask the first speaker, who is Nancy Miller-Chenier, to come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm Nancy Miller-Chenier. I'm a co-chair of the Lower Town Community Association Heritage Committee. As a committee, we are opposed to the relocation of these valued heritage buildings on Sussex Drive. In the community's view, this is not a case where moving the buildings is the only option or the best option. The Lower Town Heritage Committee believes that moving the building sets a precedent for shifting the boundary of a designated heritage conservation district. It diminishes the social history of the area and the contextual value of the buildings. Two criteria under Federal Heritage Review and the Ontario Heritage Act. Such an action is not an accepted good heritage practice. It is clear that the primary motivation for moving these buildings is to facilitate traffic flow. In other words, traffic speed takes precedent over pedestrians and residents. Cars, trucks, and buses are seen as having more importance than history. And this is the history of the oldest residential part of Ottawa. Transportation is a higher priority than the families that currently live in these buildings. As residents of Lower Town, we see many good reasons to want these buildings individually designated and restored as a tribute to the remarkable people from our community's past. These houses provide a symbolic corner of history, representative of Canada's rich cultural diversity. We were especially proud as a community to uncover the fact that Adrienne Clarkson, our country's first Asian-born Governor General, lived here when she first arrived in Canada as a child refugee. Does the relocation of these buildings reduce the heritage value and our ability to seek individual designation? We observed in the earlier discussions about demolition that saving the only single-family dwellings remaining along Confederation Boulevard was a positive statement. We support the NCC goals for a Confederation Boulevard. And we believe that the people of Canada and international visitors will be pleased to see these modest homes of real Canadians preserved along a ceremonial route that's dominated by institutional buildings. As a community, we want documented evidence that pedestrians and cyclists will benefit from the straightening of the road and the subsequent increased speed of vehicle traffic. We are unclear about the actual new location of the structures and what it might mean in terms of loss of green space and established trees. We are fearful about the complete or partial collapse of the buildings during relocation. In summary, we are convinced that the redesign of Confederation Boulevard and the inclusion of cycling lanes can be accomplished without taking the negative action of moving the buildings. We want to ensure the continued heritage value of these buildings over the need for speed. Thank you for considering this issue.
Thank you very much. And we can consider the parts that you talked about with regard to the move. We've heard from our staff that we have the expertise because we have moved significant buildings of heritage value in the recent past, in fact. But we're not here today to discuss the road alignment or where the cycling lanes are, or that's a whole other committee, and that is behind us. I think the important thing for us here on the Heritage Committee is, now that we are at that state, is that, one, we did save the buildings, for sure, and we will do our utmost, and we heard from Ms. Coots, we will ensure that they are transported to their new location well, that they manage that move well. Before you leave, does anyone have any questions? Do you have anything? Okay.
It strikes me that moving them back 6 feet on the site probably doesn't diminish the value very much, but you've stated it does. I'd like to...
I raised that as a question.
Okay.
It changes the whole memory of Adrienne Clarkson and how she interacted with that particular house. She talks a lot about things that happen in the back of the house as it's currently located. She talks about her orientation to the street as it is currently aligned. This would be a question for heritage experts.
And we'll ask that. Did you have anything else, Councillor Clark? Sally?
It cannot be denied that they won't be the same. They will be moved back, but the edge condition, the way they look and address the street, will be the same. Their relation to one another will be the same, and I think that we've also discussed, and it was mentioned in Lower Town's submission, whether or not there could be some kind of interpretation, some plaques or whatever, to discuss the history of the buildings in their former site, and maybe even a little bit about moving them, and we are perfectly willing to do that and explore that option. Whether or not, there are charming pictures that were diligently, discovered by Lower Town of Adrienne Clarkson playing in her backyard. It won't be, I'm not going to say it won't be the same backyard, but there still will be green space around the buildings. The buildings will still be there. They'll still relate to one another. I think that, given the that is what the situation will be, and I don't think that the memories will be obliterated. I think they still will play an important role on Sussex Drive.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Leslie Maitland? Welcome. Thank you for the information yesterday about Sunday's walk.
Oh, well, thank you very much for mentioning Heritage Ottawa's activities. And
well, and very nice for us today to receive these. I'm sure everyone in the audience has them as well.
Oh, yes, that's right. I just wanted to, we've already submitted comments which have been integrated into the staff report, and I just wanted to elaborate them on a bit, and also to ask a question for clarification. Heritage Ottawa has approached the National Capital Commission to request that the buildings be reevaluated by the Federal Heritage Building Review Office once they're relocated. I think that there's general agreement that there's been more research done, we know more about these properties, and very likely a reevaluation will result in a Federal Heritage Building Review Office classification of possibly classified or recognized federal heritage property, which would be good. We don't comment on traffic matters. It's not in our mandate, although I realize there are certainly overlapping concerns. But what I would like to suggest that this is really an opportunity for a good news heritage story, and I think it's important for us to embrace the good news when it does, those times that it does appear. These buildings really tell the story of the immigrant experience, not just in Canada, but in Ottawa as well, and the way that Ottawa in particular as a community and as the national capital embraced new Canadians. This is the city that took in 4,000 boat people. This is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate that Ottawa's wonderful track record in that regard. 2017 is coming up. Here are some opportunities to celebrate it, and here's a site to celebrate them at. So I hope you'll tuck that idea away and perhaps look at it as an opportunity to celebrate it. And my one question is, I understand Barry Podolsky, who did recluse himself, but could we elaborate on what it is that Barry's doing on the property, the conservation report, or what is that?
Through you, Madam Chair, the work will include the actual site plan related to where the buildings will end up, and it will also analyze and lay out the method that will be followed to move the buildings.
Okay. Yeah. That answers my question. Thank you.
Sorry. Thanks very much for coming out and for your comments, because I think that is the bigger picture here is that we did decide to save this, and it's at no small cost either that we made this decision with our eyes wide open and understanding the value as you have just stated. I'm sure that Ms. Kearns is coming up next is going to say the same thing, and definitely Nancy Miller-Chenier, every chance you get, you're defending the heritage in your community. So thank you very much, Leslie.
Thank you.
And so I'd ask Donna Kearns to come up, please. And if anyone else wants to speak, please let us know that now.
Morning.
Welcome.
I'll be very brief. Really, the issue about moving these properties is predicated on a fundamental issue, which you don't want us to talk about, but which I have to sort of state my position on very clearly. The properties would not have been considered for demolition or for moving if it wasn't a question of the roadway. And we as a community feel that we haven't been listened to about the roadway issue, and that our concerns about these properties were individual and started with the properties and with our protection of our community, that many of us feel is slowly being whittled away. This is another change on the perimeter of the community, and you know, the transportation issues that have been talked about. One of the things this gentleman said was about it being a very thorough study. Well, that may very well be, but there are questions, fundamental questions about the way that roadway is going to be constructed with sidewalks, with bicycle lanes, and for several of us in the community who've gone out, we've measured that road, and there's an error in meters. And if that error were ever taken into consideration, the whole question of moving or demolishing these properties would have to be reassessed. And really, that's all I'm saying. It is a heritage issue. We want to preserve as much as we can of a community that's been attacked relentlessly and has seen so much of our history removed. And that's why these particular houses, like any of the properties that are left in Lower Town, are really important. And I understand that there is an effort being made and a great deal of expense to move them, but you don't move heritage properties unless you absolutely have to. And we question whether that's necessary. That's all.
Thank you very much for coming out. Does anyone have any questions, Ms. Kearns? No? That's okay. I would have called you back if they did. So I think that we don't have any more. I see no more speakers on this subject. We'll bring it back to committee now for final questions or comments. Councillor Clark.
Well, we are limited to the heritage aspects, not the road aspects. We successfully argued against demolition at Transportation Committee and Council. We believe this compromise will preserve those houses, and it will solve some problems for some members of the community on the roadway, but that's when I get to Transportation Committee. But this is a significant step forward in the city's investment in heritage.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat?
Just a question based on something that Councillor Clark just said. Mentioned when this goes to Transportation Committee. Is that what you said? Yeah. Does this actually go back to Transportation Committee?
Mr. Smith?
No, it does not. The only item that requires committee and council approval is the application under the Heritage Act. The roadworks are proceeding. Full approvals have been given for those to proceed, and that's happening under the delegated approval.
When was this decision made at Transportation Committee? Because I don't believe it was this term of council.
Again, this would have been related, and I'm not the best person to answer. If you want the answer, I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Stout to join me.
It wasn't.
You know what? I didn't recognize you. I haven't seen you in so long.
You got a haircut.
I didn't even know you didn't work for us anymore.
Doesn't have his ponytail.
Okay. So,
I was curious, was this determination done in 2008, 2009 during the OP review at that time?
Madam Chair, I think the specific question is, did this road design ever reach Transportation Committee? Is that what?
Yeah. Was it finalized?
Well, the design's being finalized now. We're about to tender, and I don't believe the project did go to Transportation Committee. We're operating under delegated authority, the general manager.
Anybody have any other? Are you more confused now?
It's probably not the best. It's probably not the best way to have gone about this, considering we aren't allowed to talk about the transportation aspects.
We seem to be. I mean, and this is still a very young committee. You know, the Built Heritage. I mean, we know that the process before was totally citizen-driven and quite obscure, as opposed to the investment that we're making as a city now in the heritage. of our, and the preservation of heritage in our city, and the understanding of what's important, and the working with the communities, and with Heritage Ottawa, with all the districts, et cetera, and the revisiting of, to make sure that we're doing the right things. I mean, this is significant, but this is not the first time we're in a position like this, where either something has been made, a decision at Committee of Adjustment, or with regard to transportation, or with regard to any number of things. But it is what it is. And so, unless you have more questions on that, we are here today to give the delegated authority to the move of these buildings, and trust in our staff, the greater staff, to work with our heritage planners and do it well.
I believe that Sally and Leslie will both get hard hats on.
I was unable to hear you, Councillor.
He said, you heard, he just like to see you in a hard hat. Yeah. Anyway. On the subject, anyone else? Councillor Hobbs, anybody? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Stout, for coming out. Nice to see you again. Thank you, everyone. So, on the motion that we have before us, on the application for the properties on Sussex Drive, is that carried? You are dissenting then? Yeah, that's carried with one dissent, being Mr. Smallwood. Member Smallwood. Okay, thank you. Okay, don't go anywhere yet. We're not done. Don't go anywhere. We're done the Ogilvy. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so... Do we have any notices of motion from anyone? Any inquiries? I would like you to send the information out, if there's any new information on the Heritage Conference that's coming up here in Ottawa, if there's any more updates or anything like that for us.
The Heritage Canada Conference.
Yeah.
I saw members of the committee yesterday, and I panicked because they said, we're going to be doing this and that. And I said, but I haven't seen that. And the program is not yet out. It will be out. And Leslie's on the program committee, so it's all well in hand.
So as soon as you find that, we'll share, and then we'll, and obviously Leslie and other, I know that you're going to be participating. You're probably even involved.
Right.
Leslie Maitland?
Leslie just said it's November 1st and 2nd, so mark your calendars.
November 1st and 2nd?
Yes.
Joelle, you'll send that out to us? Because, you know, we may not have the funding to go to the one that is in, where is it, in Sarnia? No, it's in...
Last weekend?
There was one last weekend in Midland.
Oh, that's the one, so we missed it for sure.
Absolutely.
But I really think that there's value in us looking at attending wherever possible and getting that increased level of interest. I also, as a chair, intend to meet with, we are going, by the way, our trip is, that was going to be in June, where we're going to be going around to the districts and with a well-organized tour. We're doing that in September now because we had some conflicts. But I intend to meet with the representatives of each of the heritage conservation districts in the city, and with you too, Ms. Maitland. You know, maybe for some tea and cookies and chat or conversation, or meet on your own turf myself. And I will always, when something's set up, offer it to anybody else on the committee that would like to join. I want to do that over the summer. I do want to take some holidays when that opportunity arrives as well. But I intend to be doing that.
And of course, your co-member Carolyn works for Heritage Canada, so she will also keep you apprised of what's happening there, I'm sure.
Yeah, and she sent her regrets today, and with comments on all of the items on the agenda, which I think everyone was shared. Is there any other business? No. So adjournment, with our next meeting being July the 11th, Thursday, July the 11th.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone that came out.
No, but like, I just took the risk.